So we have here, you might recognize, so Heidi Crowter, who's one of the claimants in the case, and this is her husband, James Carter.
And as you can tell, he is very good looking, and I love him. Just the way he is.
And we have Liz Crowter, Heidi's mum, as well, sitting on the end. We have Máire Lea-Wilson, who was another claimant in the case, and her young son, Aidan, was the third claimant in the case. And we have Lynn Murray. Lynn Murray works with the organisation Don't Screen Us Out, which was involved in the case as well, and is the mother of an adult young woman with Down syndrome.
She's 22.
Okay.
It's Taylor Swift. See.
And I'm 26. And he's 28.
I'm not going to say how old I am. Okay. Should we start with Heidi? Can you tell us why you wanted to go to court?
Well, the reason why... Oh, wait a second. The reason why I wanted to go to court is because I was somebody who has Down syndrome, and I don't want to be seen as a walking nightmare, as I am already.
You don't want to be seen as
a walking burden, but I'm not. And because I feel really passionate about this, because I know what it's like to be living in the world with Down syndrome. And if me and my husband had a baby, which is impossible, we would keep it. But we do have two devils, who we love equally. Devils. Sorry.
Heidi, what did you think of the court's decision in the case?
When I found out that they ruled against us, I was really upset. I actually felt that I lost all my confidence in who I was, and I felt rubbish. And I thought I let everyone down. But then my mum reassured me that not many people knew about the law. So I actually I looked at the bright side. When we first tell people about the law, they are surprised. And when I first found out about the law, I could not stop crying for 2 days. It was like a stake went into my heart, a stake knife that went into my heart. And I find it really upsetting that people do this. And the fact that they are given negative comments. And I remember a lady actually was given a leaflet about funerals.
when she was...
When she was told about...
When she was 12 weeks pregnant.
Yes, there was a left-handed leaflet about how to handle grief and how to handle a baby's funeral, which I think is sick. Sorry, I think it's gross.
Yeah, she wanted information about the chromosome abnormalities, didn't she?
Yeah.
And she was given a leaflet on termination.
And funerals. Anyway.
Did you listen to the arguments in the case, Heidi? How did you find listening to the arguments that were presented?
What arguments are there?
No, when you were there, did we listen to it? We only listened to a bit, didn't we?
We only listened to a bit because it was... Even my honest thing is that it was really boring. and it was very upsetting because I'd rather go get a coffee somewhere or see a show.
Yeah, we did sightseeing, didn't we?
Yeah. We just say it was Cathedral. And then that's what I'm going to say about that.
Yeah, we went to the first half an hour.
And it was painfully boring and I nearly fell asleep. Sorry.
Okay, I'll ask one more question, then I'll move on to someone else. But Heidi, your Twitter account says "Living the Dream," doesn't it?
Yes. It's Twitter and Facebook.
Yeah, okay, and Facebook too. So, do you think it's important to spread a positive message about Down syndrome? And
well, that's the reason why that's the reason why I made the Facebook page, to show people and pregnant women who has got the diagnosis that this is what their life can be like. And me and James have a fantastic life. I've been living on my own for 7 years. I can cook, and if we're honest, it's my support staff who cooks for me.
Your support staff do it for you.
Yes, but we do contribute, and we have lots of things, and we are mad on Disney films. But let's get back to the subject. So basically, the brains behind it was my dad, mum and dad. James wanted to change it to Heidi Carter, but we didn't.
That's not relevant.
Oh, sorry.
You want the Facebook post to show.
I want my Facebook and my Twitter photo, my Twitter stuff to show people that is what a life could be like with the proper support and the proper care. And James also has a Facebook page called James Carter Living Independently. So you can follow that on Facebook and Twitter.
Yeah.
Cool.
James Carter.
Yeah.
You'll gain new followers.
Yeah.
James, so you told me you were adopted. Can you speak about your experience of being adopted?
Well, I really enjoyed being adopted to my lovely, wonderful parents. I hope that works.
The right button. Okay.
So this is my mum at the park with me, little, and my mum and dad said I was gorgeous and adorable. And I was, and I still am, according to Heidi. And then this one is me, little me, and with my brother-in-law called Mike, who's married to my sister Esther. And he's laying on the bed with me and talking. And he's very fond of me, and he's very loving. This one is me in the cot up there, and yeah. So this one is me, and I look absolutely gorgeous. My mum was saying.
How old were you when you were adopted?
And I think I was 1 then.
Yes, about 1 when you were adopted.
About 1, yeah, when I was adopted. Yeah.
Do you want to tell the story about the newspaper?
Oh, I'll do in a minute. Yeah, so this is me with my big oldest brother Ben, who is 40 odd. He's the first one who was born in my mother's womb. We went on a boat trip with him, so me and my brother, so 2 brothers. So this is me with my dad, who absolutely adores me.
Hopefully.
Yeah, so he adores me, and he always values me in my life, and he's very important to me. This one, as you all know, that's my sister, Esther.
What are you playing up there?
And my brother-in-law Mike, and in the middle there is a friend of mine from primary school called Nathan, and my favourite story of all time is the enormous turnip. I hope you know that. So we've been acting that out.
Oh, you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, he loves turnips.
This is my 18th big birthday party that my mum absolutely did for me. She made a big 4-tier chocolate cake that I wanted, with Maltesers and Haribos. And this is me. This was in Weymouth. This was me in a church. This one we had to hire it in Weymouth. and it was quite big, and we all enjoyed it with my close friends who I went to school with. It was absolutely amazing, and they were all dancing and laughing together. This is my half of my family. So that's me looking at the camera. There's Mum, there's Dad, and at the back there's my brother. As you all know, my brother's called Ben, who lives in Leicester, and Esther and Michael at the back there, who live in Weymouth. And we all went out for a nice meal for my 18th.
And they got a nephew called Noah, and he's loud.
That's me. And my mum was feeding me. And my mum said I was a nightmare with feeding.
Yeah, it still is.
No, he's not. He eats anything you put in front of him. Good.
Anyway.
And I used to eat Wotsits as well. So. There's Mum again giving me a cake. I didn't know how old I was there, but
It looks like it's a one.
it looks like one.
It's just after you went there.
Yeah. So, yeah. My mum and me. My mum looks like she's young. There's me playing with all my toys.
Next one, James.
This is me getting ready for school at primary. And it's not just a primary school, it's mainstream school. And it's called South Hill School. And they were amazing. And because the reason why they were amazing, because they helped me with my speech and language.
And how did
And very slow, and I speak very slowly. But not like Heidi.
I was being rude. He was a bit of a nightmare in school. They are fences.
I'll say that in a minute. So this is me with my dad on a zip wire at a park. This is me looking adorable, and I was playing the piano. Me and my sister, we went to an animal park, and my sister wanted to help me on the horse, little pony, whatever it is. But we enjoyed it and had a nice day.
Yeah, another one of them.
There's another one, but this is half. My sister's there with the blonde hair, and then Ben at the back there, and then there's Mum and Dad there and me. This is me and my brother-in-law Mike. I was playing the guitar, and my brother-in-law was singing on a mic, like one of these, but toy. The two brothers, we have a bond, and I love him so much. This is the whole of my family. So, as you all know, there's my dad there. And then there's Mum, then Mike, and then Esther at the back, and just to let you know, there's my brother at the back with his wife called Helen, which is my sister-in-law, and there's my gorgeous nephew called Noah, who I absolutely love, and he's got half of the energy from me. He absolutely adores me.
And he loves me as
And
well.
he loves Heidi as well. So he's so wonderful. He always plays with me and Heidi when we're down in Weymouth. There's Erin and Evie up there, my two little nieces who live in Leicester with my brother and his wife. And Erin is, I can't remember how old she is, I think she is 10 or 11. But she's got the same dietary as Heidi, gluten-free and celiac.
And his auntie.
Do you want to talk a little bit about how your parents found you?
That's it. That's the sideshow done. But I would like to say full detail is so my dad went to work and when he got back, they had do you know the Dorset Echo? In the olden days, I was in there for looking for adoption, and
Photo, wasn't it?
and my sister said that my mum and dad were talking about adopting me, and then they were having a meeting, and then my sister said, I think that's enough, Mum and Dad. Let's just get him. And they finally got me.
They fell in love with him.
And they absolutely love me and adore me, and they used to teach me quite a lot of Makaton signs. So that's the full story.
And you could talk about your school.
And school, I was a nightmare at school. I was a runner. They put up fences up, higher fences. And my granddad used to put a lock on the door, so I couldn't get out. but this, and I used, when I was at primary school, some of the TAs were, I was a runner and I used to run away from them, but they had to catch me. It was very hard, and I used to throw people's hats over the fence. So I was absolutely a nightmare, but other than that, they love me and adore me. That's the end now.
Well done, my dear. And also, I fell in love with him too.
Thank you very much, James. That was great. Great presentation. I want to come back to Liz, but I think first I'd like to talk to Máire, as you're another claimant in the case, and had a different experience and perspective that you could, I guess, provide as background in the case. Can you speak about how you got or why you got involved in the case and what your experience of your pregnancy was? Yes.
Yeah. So I'm in a fairly small minority of women that actually find out in the third trimester that my child would have Down syndrome. And I was 34 weeks pregnant at the time at which this was kind of first placed in front of us. Everything had been fairly typical the whole way through. When a ghost scan showed that there were quite a few markers which were associated with Down syndrome. And me and my husband were taken into the sad, we're really sorry room, boxes of tissues put in front of us. We wanted to learn more about the surgery that our child would need when he was born. And we were told that we weren't going to talk about that first. What we needed to talk about was termination. After quite a long conversation in which we were both crying, the obstetrician then wrote in my notes that parents are committed to the pregnancy, which, whilst I was glad it was there because I thought that would stop the questions from coming, I also felt like it was really very dehumanizing about the fact that I was about to have a baby that I was very excited about. Subsequent to that, we did need additional monitoring because fetuses with Down syndrome can struggle a bit in the third trimester. And at multiple appointments following that, we were repeatedly asked, did we want to terminate the pregnancy? By the third time we were asked, I think my husband was just like, no, like we're not even entering into that conversation anymore. We made it quite clear. So I was left feeling actually very traumatized. And I think it's interesting when we talk a lot about women's choice because my choice was disregarded on a number of occasions. It was very poor for my mental health, the way that we were treated and the way that we were given this information. And it was incredibly difficult. And I've got two sons, my eldest, who's Tom, who is a typically developing child, and then my youngest, Aidan, who has Down syndrome. And when I was pregnant with Tom, no one sat me down and treated me like I had to do some sort of risk assessment around his very existence. However, this was how I was treated with Aidan. And so in that regard, I felt like I was discriminated against as a pregnant woman carrying a disabled fetus, and that my son Aidan was being discriminated against, in that there was such a difference in the way that, the two boys' lives were presented to me. And I very much love and value them equally, so I feel strongly that society and the law should as well. So the reason that I got involved with the case was actually I saw Heidi giving an interview on Victoria, Derbyshire back in February 2020. That's how long this has been going on for. And I felt so strongly that my experience might be able to bring something to the case. So, I got in touch with Liz and Heidi's solicitors and was like, can I help out here? And they did feel that my experience would be valuable in kind of discussing some of the ethical issues and the different lens that this is discrimination and can perpetuate stigma against people with Down syndrome who are living, but also pregnant women. So that was how I got involved.
Yeah, thank you. We'll have some questions at the end, if that's okay. I just want to ask, get through, I think, all the members of the panel, and then we'll certainly open up for questions. Thank you so much, Máire, for that. Maybe I'll come back to Liz now, then, and could you give us your thoughts on the case and your involvement and what your thoughts were?
Yeah. Well, if you get a phone call from Lynn Murray asking if you want to take the government to court, you either say no or you say yes, and here we are 2 years later. So don't answer the phone the phone to Lynn. So obviously it's a very hard and difficult thing to explain to somebody that the law values them less than anybody else. So I wouldn't normally have told Heidi about this, but she saw a newspaper article about it and asked me what it meant, and so we did explain it to her. We felt that it was, me and my husband Steve, felt that it was a very worthwhile thing doing because the law was so old, and we've moved on so far from 1967 when most babies with Down syndrome were institutionalised and weren't even allowed to go to school or have their heart surgeries and things. So we thought it was really important to try and get it changed, and we still are. Obviously, I think the worst bit was when we heard that we hadn't won. I mean, I think we would probably had really accepted that. I'm sure that we probably would lose, but it's still just horrible having that final verdict that the law disregards people with disabilities, and the wording of serious handicap 50 years later is so out of date and out of touch.
Thanks very much, Liz. Right, so you mentioned Lynn, so I'll come the other side of the table. Lynn, can you describe then what your involvement was, how the case got started, how your organisation is involved?
Yeah. Well, I suppose I met Heidi in 2016. She came along to a demonstration we had outside Parliament, and she spoke very strongly around the issues affecting people with Down syndrome because of the sort of prenatal screening landscape. And then we had another event inside Parliament. An MP invited us to hold an event, and Simone, who's here, also spoke there, and several other people, including Heidi. So we've been quite closely involved with her activism, really sort of developed. And lots of people felt that the law should be changed. What we tried to do previously through the Don't Screen Us Out campaign was to have policy changed, the things we talked about earlier about information and knowledge about disability. And it's quite a brick wall, people within the NHS really don't understand the disability landscape. And then just to add in a baby that's not there and this sort of, a screening office, and there just seems to be a whole dearth of ethics in that very room and those very conversations. So when Heidi, was interested in looking to change the law, I thought it would be good to support her. And so in February 2020, it was announced the Times interviewed everyone involved in the case, and that's when it became public, and we raised money to be able to take the case forward. And I think at the moment there's about 3,700 donations being made to the case. They've raised about £130,000, and that's basically come from the public. So, you know, again, it's not about any sort of group funding this. This is about people who are interested in this. What I've also found is when the media call up, so my sort of role has been to field the media, you know, raise awareness. But when the case went to court last year, what you found was a lot of probably particularly younger people in the media were like, I didn't even know this was the case. I didn't know abortion up to birth was available. I couldn't believe it. You know, I had to be in touch with a policewoman to arrange a gathering outside. She was like, I've just been reading about this. I didn't understand that was the law. You know, you go to the doctors and she didn't understand it. Lots of people have become aware of the law. And I think that's been a big plus point for the case, is that we can start to talk about it.
The media reaction, to me, it seemed like it was very positive, wasn't it?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I suppose you could have had quite different reactions. It's interesting how you mentioned the funding issue. I mean, was that something that you were asked to address sometimes, whether there was, what were the motivations in bringing the case and where the funding was coming from? And
Personally, not really, but what you find is people talk about you behind your back in that respect. Well, this is
but
probably
the
funded,
media response was very positive, wasn't it?
Yeah,
Because you know, hearing you speak and you talk about that, you know, you lost the case, but it brought but we'll see, won't we? There might be an appeal, but it did bring a lot of public attention to the issues. And do you think? Does anyone think in a way that there's a win in that sense in terms of affecting public opinion?
I mean, sorry to jump in here, but I 100% think there is, because, you know, even if we don't get to appeal, even if the case stops now, the fact that there has been this increased focus and people have, you know, seen people like, you know, Heidi and James step up and self-advocate and talk, you know, so eloquently about their lives and how brilliant they are. And as you can see, they're just incredibly funny people as well.
Thank you. So is your son.
He is, isn't he? But, you know, if I've always felt that if our stories can reach, you know, even just a handful of doctors who may then change their practices and the way that they approach these conversations, if just a few people can think, actually, this is maybe not the sort of a life that I thought people, you know, that have or know or love someone with Down syndrome, you know, that's a win. That is a win.
Yeah. Okay, I can see there's probably people who want to ask questions. Can I bring over the microphone so that people online will hear you? Just a moment.
Lost her assistant. She's lost her technical assistant.
Would you like to?
Hello, my name's Simone Aspis from Reclaiming Our Futures Alliance, a disabled people's-led organisation. As usual, disabled people are left out of this whole debate as an organisation. And I did ask right at the beginning when Sisters of Frida's had withdrawn whether our organisation could come along, because we've been involved in Heidi's court case. And I just want to share some reflections as a disabled person on behalf of Disabled People's Organisation, which I hope will add to the future discourse of where we go from now. So, I mean, I just have to say it's been a great experience working with Heidi and James on taking forward the campaign. And what we've started to do with Heidi it was only when Rofa got involved, I said to Heidi, our organisation, people with learning difficulties, people with Down syndrome, know nothing about this court case. You know, I've had mums saying, my children don't really understand the court case. They don't really. So I said to Heidi, why don't you come along and speak to our organisations? And she did. So she came to people first a couple of times, didn't you, Heidi?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, you did. And you got support from us. And through our engagement, Heidi got a range of support from our organisation. One of our colleagues did a great leaflet for Heidi. We had over 30 contributions of disabled people and their led organisations. We had poems, we had speeches, we had a number of disabled people coming down there. And the question is, then there was also a bigger second issue, was how do we engage people with learning difficulties? I hear Liz say very clearly, we don't want to upset people with Down syndrome. We don't want to upset disabled people. But unless we engage with disabled people, we'll never have an equal say in this. It is all our responsibilities to go out there and tell people, how do people self-advocate unless we, as a community, disabled people and non-disabled people, share that information with other people. People don't understand about this court case. They do. We need to get out there, speak to our communities, our self-advocacy groups, to do that work. The second thing I wanted to raise was about how inclusive, we are really, what this really raised for me also is what are our responsibilities when we are going out there and campaigning on behalf and with people with learning difficulties, people with Down syndrome. And the challenges that we expect people to have, if they are speaking on behalf of us, whether that's lawyers, mums, dads, what is their responsibility for making sure, A, the court process is inclusive of people with learning difficulties, people with Down syndrome? What is their role in trying to explain to people what the law is all about? Do we need to challenge the way the court process is? Do we need to have different messages so people don't understand what an abortion is? But there's lots of ways that we are wanting to engage with our community. If we're talking about change in our communities, change in legislation, what is all our roles and responsibilities for showing good practice? We have to look at how we all work together to take this challenge forward. And really, really important, because I'm quite disappointed I'm not up there, because as an equal, because whole this campaign has been, whilst Heidi's been running it and it's been great, but the debate has been between parents and non-disabled professionals, pro-abortion, pro-life. Where is disabled people's voice and organisations in this vital thing? We are talking about disabled people's human rights, as opposed to a woman's right to choice. When I first was approached about this campaign, I think
we'll probably have to let some other people ask some question. But thanks very much for that contribution. It's very helpful. Thank you. Well, we hope we give some voice to some perspectives in this conference. But we're limited in time, and we can't have everyone. But yes, great. Okay, should we take another question?
Thanks very much, and thanks, Simone. That was really powerful, and I think really helpful in bringing a lot of themes together that we've already heard this morning. My question really was to Heidi, actually, and picks up on something that Simone was saying about the court process, and you described that as boring, and I think a lot of people find it boring, even those of us who have read quite a few court cases and have been and watched them. But how could that case have been more accessible to you? What would have made it easier, or would have enabled you to have stayed and been there and listened to it? A case that was about your life and the lives of people like you. So I really love to hear your advice to the rest of us about what could have helped you feel more part of that and that process.
Well, my advice is to make sure it's more accessible to us. So make sure there's because easy read, and to make sure they have more lifts. Because my mum can hardly walk, so maybe you can put lifts in there.
the actual talking part, what would have been helpful then?
If they actually got me to talk. And also, I think instead of reading the law papers, they have easy read law papers as well. So, because many of us don't understand the jargon in the case, we do get what the law is about, but we don't understand what they're speaking about. So that's why I find it really boring, and I nearly fell asleep.
It was also because it was quite upsetting that I didn't.
Yes, it was also very upsetting to hear the case.
That's why I was mainly taking her out. I thought she would find it boring and hard.
It was.
And upsetting. So that was the main reason, really.
I found it upsetting because I do like doing the court case, but I find it upsetting that I have to.
Yeah. Yes.
I think was the good thing about positive media was that Heidi did get to speak to lots of people. You know, she was interviewed, you know, by news journalists and reporters, and I think at least, and of course, just to add to that, it was all during COVID, so that made the court issues worse, as Simone knows. You know, we couldn't be inside or whatever anyway. So at least she, you know, that there was that aspect of she got to speak to people, she got to talk about it. But we've certainly got a long way to go in terms of making the courts more accessible, and thankfully Simone's leading the way on that one for us. So just to say that.
Yeah. There was at least two journalists who came into their interview with us and with Aidan and Máire, who started off being woman's choice, and then by the end of the interviews, they were actually saying no, actually they could understand the case, and they felt that our case was right, that Aidan and Heidi should be treated equally. And James. But that was, thanks. The Good Morning Britain woman told me that the interview we did in some park in London was the most exciting interview she'd done all year. So.
Yes.
And the most fun. And she was one of the ones who said we changed her mind.
And going back to what Simone said of getting people involved with it, we are trying to, but it's also quite hard to do that. Because when I first found out, I found it really hard to accept it. So thank you, Simone.
Maybe have another question. I think we have time. Yes.
Hi, just a brief comment and then a question. I'm Emil. I'm a junior doctor from the Philippines, and I study in Glasgow. I study public health there. First of all, I come from a different lived experience where in our country, abortion is illegal. It's in our constitution. So I come from a different lived experience. But I can understand as a medical professional how one would be, as Heloise mentioned earlier, how one would be thinking about fears of litigation, for example, expectations brought about both by legal and even medical professional regulatory bodies. So I can understand how those medical professionals would act, and I understand how the experience of Máire, for example, is, at some point even harassing, even a form of harassment by medical professionals asking again and again. But that's just because it's the fruit of the system that I understand has to be challenged. But my question is, to the panelists, how do you think, given the result of the court decision now, I understand that you're considering on appealing, further challenging the current law, but beyond that, how do we address the system, the process? And as Heloise mentioned, this might not even just be a legal concern, a political concern, but this is actually a cultural concern at that. So what are the next steps, basically, from this? Thank you.
Well, the next step is to, on Tuesday, we're going up to London to hopefully appeal. And I'll be speaking at the appeal, so if you could think of me, that'd be very nice. And we had 2 hours to persuade them to appeal. And I think the reason why the medical professionals are not very good because of lack of training and lack of understanding. I used to be a lecturer at Coventry University in helping them to break the news. and me and my mum. And I think they need to meet someone who has Down syndrome. I mean, when I go to bed at night, I mentally put my husband and my nephew in together, and I don't see any difference between them. Sometimes James can be a lot like Joss, and Joss can be a lot like James. But I love them both equally, but in very different ways.
So you lectured nurses and...
I lectured nurses and trainee midwives, and which is so cool because our support staff is a trainee nurse.
It was quite an interesting exchange at the doctor's recently. So it was a trainee GP, and she had to go out and ask the doctor to come in to get, to make sure she'd diagnosed it right. And while we were waiting, these two were whittering away to each other and banter and, husband and wife talk. And she just turned to me and she said, "We had a day about Down syndrome when we were training. I've learnt more. I've learnt more from these two in this consultation than I have in the whole of my training."
Wow.
So that has got to be, it's got to be changed, which is why what Liz and Lynn and Colette are doing is so important with public health to get things changed.
Closer to an hour.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I remember that someone had to Google Down syndrome, so they weren't actually giving it proper training.
Yeah, so Dr. Corcoran just made a comment. I'll make it, for those who are watching online, won't have heard it. You said it's an hour is the standard amount of time doctors will learn about Down syndrome.
Purely in a medical model as well.
In a medical model during their entire training.
Yeah.
Okay. And
they are told is about the genetics, and it's introduced as an abnormality and a genetic abnormality and a condition, not as people. And we need to look at the people first.
yeah. So when the information is being provided, this is the context of the training where that's being provided. Yeah.
All they do, they just put down a list of everything they don't really say it's a baby. So when my mum was pregnant with Dan, they would say it's just a baby, enjoy it. But when it comes to us, they say all these mean comments. And
So Heidi and James got quite upset the other day because James had a letter from a consultant to a GP, and it said problems, and then it listed, James had quite a few stomach problems and pneumonia and a blood clot and all this. They were all listed, and then Down syndrome was listed as a problem, and that happens continually. And I've seen parents get upset about it and asked it to change, but it was actually quite different when they sent me a text saying, "Look, this has really upset us."
yeah, because it's not a problem.
They were going to write, I don't know if you have, but they were going to write to the consultant and ask him to change, because he was, actually at the appointment he was fine. He was very nice and friendly and talked to them both, talked to James, but then when he gets to his letter, it just becomes this great long list of what he's had done, plus Down syndrome. I think when they, probably in that hour, they get told, genetic abnormality, and then they probably get told heart problems, gut problems, sight, and all the other things the babies with Down syndrome have, which the rest of us have.
I know.
There's a good forum called Whose Shoes, a good sort of initiative, and that's carried out from an NHS. It's someone that organises it. She invites people along from the NHS. She invites stakeholders, women that have had pregnancies, etc. And I went along to one of them, and I was happened to be sitting next to the obstetrician in the local hospital, and there was a midwife on the other side of the table, and I was talking about NIPT and all the issues, and he says, "Oh, don't worry, we've got it all under control, we know what we're doing." And as he went away to talk to someone else, the midwife across the way said to me, "Can you help us? Can you get someone in? We don't know anything about Down syndrome." So even within that environment, one person thinks we've got it sussed, and he's the guy at the top, and the other person, and in that case, I could get someone in to help go along and speak to them about lived experience, but that makes you realise that that's just one hospital, one occasion, and one set of people, and it is really about changing the culture. education, education, education.
I think the main problem is that they just list all the problems. Yes, I've got a heart defect. Yes, you've got duodenum. We had a duodenum tusia, same as Adam, but that doesn't define us. I have celiac, but that doesn't define me.
Yeah, what
And Liz has celiac too.
yeah, what Liz was just saying about the letter of the problems from the GP. It said about Down syndrome. I don't see it as a problem. I just see it as what I am, just as I am.
Was that one plea? Sorry. And I don't see it as a problem either. And my husband is the best husband in the world. And he's definitely not a problem. This took me a lot of things. I'll stop talking.
Right, on that note, I think I wish this conference could go on for weeks, but I think we're running late. I think we'll have to, Father Andreas, we'll have to wrap up the panel and go for lunch. Thank you so very much for participating. It's been great to hear from all of you.
And thank you for the questions.
All right.
We can have lunch now.